All right. Well, I'm Dave Rosenblum, VP of Global Media at Mattel.
And I'm Leigh Trelenberg, Director of US Media.
So thanks for the introduction. We're going to talk to you today about kind of how we are seeing Mattel managing in really what's a difficult marketplace. So this is Mattel's corporate strategy, which is to grow our IP-driven toy business and expand our entertainment offering. All of our strategies roll up to driving profitable growth and capturing the full value of our IP. The important part for today is that evolved demand creation is part of our corporate strategy. We're really looking at how we need to change the way that we're marketing today. We are in a transformational time for media and for media's role in demand creation for all of us. But this affects Mattel really more significantly than everybody else because kids are really the first to change behavior. If you look at Mattel's history, Mattel has had to shift our advertising strategy ahead of the general market. We sponsored the Mickey Mouse Club in 1955, and we became, oops, I gotta go back. I thought that the red button. All right, there we go. If we look at Mattel's history, Mattel has had to shift our advertising strategy really ahead of everybody. So, like I said, we had to sponsor the Mickey Mouse Club in 1955, and we became one of the first companies to advertise to children. And in 1983, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe was a syndicated television show that was one of the first kids' syndicated television shows, and it was really an early example of Mattel's IP-driven strategy. In 1998, while most advertisers were still debating if cable channels could ever surpass the viewership of broadcast, kids' cable became the majority of Mattel's advertising mix. And in 2005, the same year that YouTube launched, even before they had ads, Mattel had YouTube channels for Barbie and Hot Wheels. And today, kids' digital is the majority of Mattel's media mix. And our IP-driven strategy has resulted in hits such as the Barbie movie and Hot Wheels Let's Race on Netflix.
So that brings us to today's agenda. So today we're going to talk about how Mattel is evolving demand creation across our brands and how we can partner together to drive accountability and change in our industry. As Dave mentioned, Mattel is often moving faster than the industry around us. And this presentation will showcase how we leverage the data that we have available and how we can partner together to drive that accountability, evolution, and change. So let's look at our consumer journey. So our demand creation starts with kids because we want to create products that kids ask their parents for. On the left, you'll see our kid ask. So our kid product video is important to us, and it's a main KPI that we look at is kid reach because we want to make sure that we're driving demand with kids. But we also focus on engagement and affinity with our audience through YouTube, gaming, and brand partnerships. On the right, you'll see our shopper purchase journey. So next, we're looking for kid driving that shopper and parent ask. And our shopper journey is focused on the acquisition, retention, and conversion of parents after they get that kid ask. So let's go back to 1998, the last time there was a generational shift in media. Back in 1998, there was a generational shift from broadcast TV to pay TV with cable. Back in 1998, TV accounted for nearly all of kids' media time. There was 95% reach of kids 2 to 11 on linear, and Nickelodeon itself had a 58% reach against kids 2 to 11. For reference, now it's about 3.3%. And one spot on Nickelodeon could reach 819 kids alone in a single moment. And then for all of the other Disney and Nickelodeon kids out there, Disney Adventure Publication had a circulation of nearly 1 million. So back in 1998, the broadcast, cable, and satellite was also global. So the ecosystem allowed for us to scale our toy commercials globally. So everyone's familiar with toy commercials in here. Let us know. Are you familiar with toy commercials? Everyone's seen one? Great. We love that. So we recognize that toy commercials have generally had like a little bit of a formula. So much so that in the Barbie movie, we actually even made fun of ourselves with a parody of a toy commercial. So let's take a look.
Okay, kids, it's time to run out and get the new depression Barbie. She wears sweatpants all day and night. She spent 7 hours today on Instagram looking at her estranged best friend's engagement photos while eating a family-sized bag of Starbursts. And now her jaw is killing her, and she's going to watch the BBC's Pride and Prejudice for the 7th time until she falls asleep.
Our families is such that any alliance between us must be regarded as a highly reprehensible connection.
Anxiety, panic attacks, and OCD sold separately.
So, funny story, when Dave and I saw an early screening of the movie, we may have laughed a little bit harder than the people around us. And also, this is true. In order to play the clip, we needed to remind you that the Barbie movie is available on digital and Blu-ray, so get your copy now.
So Mattel is really faced with the reality that kids' TV ratings are down 90% since its peak. As Leanna mentioned, in 1998, linear TV reached 95% of kids. Today, linear TV reaches 55% of kids weekly, but this is not only on kids' networks. This is across everything. So a lot of those networks and a lot of that reach is really unavailable to us unless we wanted to pay really, really significant prices to advertise in places where kids aren't really the target. And I don't know about everybody else in the room, but we don't really talk about clutter anymore. But it's worse than ever. It takes 1,000 spots to get 100 kid 2 to 11 TRPs today, and it only took 62 spots in 2006. And this is only on TV. It doesn't include all the other channels that Mattel now advertises and all the other places where we know that there's significant clutter, especially in digital. We previously only had to advertise on a handful of cable and broadcast networks to really get reach against kids.
So what are those other channels that kids are consuming their content? So YouTube and gaming are really popular with kids, with younger kids skewing a little bit more towards streaming and YouTube, and older kids skewing a little bit more towards gaming. And all of these shifts across YouTube, 85% on YouTube, streaming video at 71%, gaming at 60%, social media at 46%, linear at 41%. And while we know that Mattel doesn't advertise to kids on social media, we do know that they're there. And all of these shifts across media have meant that we need to come up with new measurement methodology. And while we don't have as much data as we would like, we do have a pretty good idea of where our audience is. According to our Nielsen data of all persons streamed, in December of 2024, YouTube achieved a record-setting 11% of watch time, according to Nielsen Gauge.
So the data that Leanna is talking about now is all audiences. And what we have to do is we have to do our own analysis on kid-supported, on ad-supported kid viewing. So while the data isn't perfect, we can get good enough information on kids viewing to the ad-supported services to really understand what's happening. And YouTube dominates even more with kids. They have more than 5 times the share of the next closest services. And many of the services that get a lot of viewing don't really have a lot of ad-supported viewing. So they're really unreachable for Mattel with ads. But we're only buying digital impressions. We can figure out where people are, but we can't necessarily figure out, what is the best way to reach them and if they're engaging with us and if it's on target. And so we did an analysis of on-target delivery of our adult buys. And we found that only 12.5% of our impressions were delivered to parents of kids 2 to 11. And this is for services where we were using the supplier's first-party data, where they're supposed to have good information about the demographics of their audience, and they're supposed to be targeting it to our consumer. But what we found is that's not really happening. But this isn't anything new. Sellers have always delivered on-target delivery. So in this chart that we have here, we can see in 1998, the on-target delivery of women 18 to 34 was kind of similar. It was pretty low. And at that time, we were also looking at delivery against parents of kids using Nielsen data. So like, this isn't really anything new. This is how consumers watch TV. And even though we have digital, the digital data isn't really as targeted as the sellers are making it out to be.
So what about the MMM? We often hear that the MMM is a solution, and our MMM is very valuable. We often use it to make decisions about how to spend our media, but it isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. The MMM often points us to find the cheapest impressions possible. So we actually did a plot chart here where we showcased CPM and ROAS across different partners. And as you can see, there's a really strong correlation between low CPMs and ROAS. And one way that we're looking to solve some of these issues is that we developed our own methodology to calculate reach for kids. So we start with all the data that we have available, and we add in third-party data, and then we look at on-target delivery using unique ad serving data for our unique audience delivery. Then we manually calculate reach using our own deduplication calculations to create our own reach methodology. But we know this isn't perfect, and we need better data for on-target delivery.
And we do have an example of what we can use for a proxy for on-target delivery. The organic engagement that we can measure with our YouTube channels is really a proxy for on-target delivery. If we're getting engaged views on our channels, that we know is our people. They're interested in our content that we're making. We can see that they're engaging, and we can see that that means that we're doing better against on-target delivery. So we look at many metrics across all of our YouTube channels, and we understand, are we getting organic delivery? Are we driving with paid consumers to our channel? And are they staying? And are they engaging? But similar metrics don't exist, or they're not scalable for most of our paid campaigns. So what I would say with that is, here's our call to action. As Leanna mentioned, MMM is a great tool, and we use MMM, but a lot of times in our industry, we talk about MMM as the solution to everything, and that's the way to solve everything. It's a great tool, but it points us to just getting the cheapest inventory. And my hypothesis of why it points us to the cheapest inventory is because there's so much waste. Our on-target delivery is likely poor, and we need to acknowledge that as an industry, it's really not possible to eliminate waste and be 100% in target. And some sellers often position the solution as, let's just deliver 100% on target with digital because of the targeting availabilities with digital. Sellers often also say that addressable is the solution, but we've often found that addressable is really not 100% on target. We haven't found those solutions to eliminate all waste. And so what we think we need to do is we need to hold ourselves accountable as an industry to more accurately measure on-target delivery and engagement with our messages. It requires greater transparency from sellers, but it also requires collaboration between buyers and sellers from all of us. We need to have a shared sense of responsibility, and we also need to have a shared sense of responsibility that digital may not mean less waste. That's our talk for today. Thank you. Questions?
Leanna, Dave, thank you guys so much. I would also like to say thank you so much for choosing the Colin Firth Pride and Prejudice. He is much better, Mr. Darcy, than Matthew McFadden, and I will fight anyone who says differently.
Right.
Find me.
That was Greta Gerwig. Like, we had nothing to do with that.
We'll take the
When I give you a compliment, just roll with it. No one's gonna know. We're going to open it for questions for the audience. Please introduce yourself and the company that you are with before you ask your question.
Hey, thank you so much. Daniel with Broadsign. We do programmatic digital out of home. Great, love all of this. You talk about fraud, you talk about all these different things. Do you take these strategies, extend them to the other funnels, the other channels? I'm sitting here thinking, you don't target quote unquote children, but you can target around schools, you can target around toy stores, you can target around movie theaters, all these malls. So how much do you use out of home? How much do you use the data you collect from these other channels? And what's stopping you from putting more into it?
I'll start, and then I'll turn it over to Leanna, because she has a specific example that she can talk about of something that we did this last fall with out of home. I would say that answer your question is generally yes. We are looking at shoppers. We used to kind of talk about our targets as kids and moms. And we have transitioned that. We now talk about kids, shoppers, and fans of our brands. Yeah, right, exactly. So, it's kind of antiquated, we think, to just say moms or the purchaser, and we only want to target moms. We really are targeting shoppers for kids as, our other target. I would say from a first-party data standpoint, we don't have a ton of first-party data. We have D2C, and we sell direct to consumers, but that's really a different consumer. It's essentially, we're doing drops of product that sell out really quickly, and it's like a hardcore collector that we're targeting with shoppers. So most of our shopper data is owned by our retailers, and so that's a big challenge for us to get first-party data. We're kind of building that capability. But I think even when we have first-party data, the challenge that we talked about here, even with shoppers, still exists, right? So with out of home, if we do digital out of home and do programmatic out of home, the targeting ability of that is never going to be 100% on target. And I think a lot of times the solutions, when people talk about it, they talk about it as we're just going to get digital impressions, and every single impression is going to be on target. And we know that that's not the case. And I'll turn it over to Leanna, who can talk about a specific out of home example from this last fall.
Yep. So we have done a little bit of outdoor, but I think there's opportunity for us to continue exploring the platform. In the fall, we did some outdoor at Westfield malls and malls that aligned with where our product was sold. So either had a Macy's, a Target, or a Walmart, because we have found that if we do outdoor, we want to make sure that they can immediately go and buy the product. But we have seen success when we align the outdoor with the key shopping season around Thanksgiving holiday. So we're looking forward to our MMM results to kind of validate it further, but we're excited about the kind of small examples that we've seen and if we can scale.
Yeah.
Hi, Trevor Guthrie from Giant Spoon. You showed the example from the nostalgic back what we remember commercials when we were kids. Can you talk a little bit about how creative has evolved? Do you still use that same formula of creative? What looks different today, or what's really effective?
Yeah, I would say for the most part, I think part of the reason why Leanna and I laughed so hard when we first saw that in the movie is that some of our creative is still exactly like that. And we have, experimented with doing different types of creative. We have brand spots that are more broadly targeted to, families and shoppers, and that are a little broader and look kind of, I would say not traditional toy advertising. And then I think, a lot of the content that we make is also very different. So there's a lot that we're doing. We talked about YouTube and how on YouTube we really try to drive engagement with our channels. And a lot of the creative that we're doing on YouTube that we make ourselves is more narrative-based. It is, it advertises a toy, but isn't kind of, the traditional toy spot that's just kind of toy feature, like, and it's kind of follows that formula, and it has 15 seconds, and it has to have an island in it, which the island is, the shot of the product at the end of the spot that, says like, comes with all of these features, batteries not included, and it's kind of a regulation, and, for toy spots. So it kind of, toy spots still are somewhat formulaic, and we recognize that we need to try to break out of that formula, but it's really hard. And a lot of it too has to do with, a lot of the regulations with TV advertising that, still exist.
Any other questions for Dave and Leanna?
Thanks, Dan. Hi, from One Tag. Just curious how you're addressing the changes in privacy law as it relates to kids advertising.
Well, that's a tough one.
Wait,
a lot of meetings.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. I speak to legal quite often. I guess is the answer. I mean, I think that obviously there is, I think you may be referring to, I know way more about this than I really should, and I'm not a lawyer. I think you're referring to COSA, which is like the new law, the new regulation that it's not really, law yet. So I think the answer is essentially, like there is a lot with kids privacy regulation and just privacy regulation in general that makes a whole lot of sense. Like COPA, on its face it makes a lot of sense. Essentially, you can't collect personal information about children without parents' permission. And it's pretty simple. It leads to some really complicated conversations that we have to have, right? It's like how do you identify that someone's a child without collecting information, right? That someone's a child. So it leads to then, a lot of things where you can't really then collect any data, but you can collect data on ad serving and just data that allows you to run your business. So I think like the general answer to the question is that kids' privacy is really important, right? And so like we're constantly kind of talking about it, making sure that like we're following the law, but that we're also just being responsible beyond just only following the law. That we don't want to collect information on children.
Last question over here.
Adam, Zimmerman Advertising. You talked about the Barbie movie, and I think everyone probably saw it, and you guys did a great job on that. And Hasbro's been doing that for years with Transformers and many others. Did you see a meaningful impact to sales when that movie came out? I mean, it's something that's non-traditional advertising that was really advertising for you for 2 hours. But did you see a spike when that came out?
Yes.
Good. One would hope. But did you see the return on it? I mean, like, I'm just curious what the benefit of, other than it's a 2-hour commercial. I mean, obviously it had legs for a while, I imagine.
I mean, I would say like it's not a 2-hour commercial, right? So I think the reason that it's not a 2-hour commercial is that our strategy, the IP-driven strategy that we talked about, like, first of all, it's not, like, as you mentioned, it's not anything new, right? Like, our friends from Hasbro are here, and, like, entertainment in the toy industry, like, has always been a part of the strategy. We mentioned He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. There was G.I. Joe from Hasbro around the same time. So, comic books and, cartoons and movies, like, have always been part of the toy marketing mix. And I would say the other reason why I think like saying the Barbie movie was a 2-hour commercial isn't accurate is because, what we did was we hired, producers. Robbie Brenner, who's the head of Mattel Films, she was hired to come to Mattel. She was a successful producer, and their goal with the Barbie movie was to make the best movie. Right? It wasn't like, let's make something that's going to sell toys. And they hired Greta Gerwig, who, in my opinion, right, creative genius. And, she came up with what was a great movie. And it wouldn't have worked if it wasn't just a great movie. And so I think like that's kind of what our strategy is, I think like it makes a lot of sense. You just want to make good movies and then success will follow. And if you make a 2-hour toy commercial, then consumers will reject it. They'll see it as a 2-hour toy commercial and this is just made to sell toys.
But I think there was an aspect of, with the movie, let's change the way people think about Barbie. And it's not a brand perception movie either, but it was an opportunity to be a little bit more self-effacing, to be a little bit more subversive than Barbie typically is. And the other piece was that they had to give Greta like creative freedom. So she had to have the ability to make fun of Mattel and make fun of Barbie, or else the movie wouldn't work. So there was like a bit of a mixture of like creative freedom, but also like, let's use it as a launch pad for like a different way to think about Barbie. So in that sense, like it was successful also.
I lied. We have one more question. And Adam, I'm going to call you out. Open-ended questions, everybody. Open-ended questions. We'll get more than just those one-word responses.
Good morning, Jared Belsky from Acadia. So you had some incredible charts that basically said it takes a lot more effort to reach the same or less people. Could you talk about, from either your team perspective or your partners or agencies perspective, what's that meant for team composition, head count, even like late nights and tears? But those are just charts. So maybe getting away from the media math and maybe going to the human piece, I'd really love to understand that. That'd be cool.
Oh, that's a good question. First of all, Rachel Marsh from Spark is here. She can probably talk more about the late nights and the tears from her team than I can, to be fair. I would say that there's tons of presentations that we give internally about how much extra work it takes and how, we used to, advertise on 5 or 6 partners and now, we have exponentially more partners and all the extra work it takes. I would say that while it's more complicated, we have to be scrappy. We don't necessarily get, everything we need in terms of like extra resources, extra people. We're constantly dealing with trying to figure out how we need to do more with less. And I would say the other thing is Mattel has historically been like a really difficult client. I think like I've worked at other toy companies too. And, just the toy industry in general, has typically always been like a difficult client. Like our sales are concentrated into a short period of time. Like we, make lots of changes, things like happen fast, and we're in a hit-driven business. And so what I would say is one thing that we've certainly made an effort to do in working with our partners is while we're difficult, also be a good partner and see kind of our partners, our agency, as like an extension of our team, and that we're all kind of working together to try to solve these problems. So we've tried to kind of make an effort to change the way our relationships with our partners work to, maybe eliminate as many of the tiers as possible. So it's hard work, right? Like it's not easy work, but we try for it to not be something that is too many tiers, I would say.
And that's just like on the media side.
Right.
Obviously, like we have partners who work on the creative side, and that is also getting more complex. So it's like, how do you balance the need for platform perfect and bespoke creative for every platform with, minimal creative resources that don't seem to be growing at the pace of the industry either. So I think it's not even just on the media side, but also our partners who make our assets.
Leanna and Dave, thank you so much for kicking us off this morning.